So we're going to talk about linear relationships. We're going to use slope and y-intercept in a way that makes sense. Now, slope. The best way to have slope, is as a fraction, because then we can use rise over run, correct? So if slope is in a fraction format, we can use rise over run. What if slope is an integer? Meaning it's a -2 or a -1 or a +3. How can I make that a fraction? How can I make that a fraction?
What? You put 1 over 1.
I put it over 1, right? So let's look at this first one here. This first one here has a linear equation that says y equals 1/2 x plus 1. Well, right below it, I'm going to write y equals mx plus b. You guys, it shouldn't take that long in there. So we know that m is going to be our 1/2 and b is going to be our 1, correct? Now, what does b mean?
Constant.
What does b mean? It is a constant.
Y-intercept.
It is the y-intercept. It is where the line intersects the y-axis. It's also called the constant. Yes, you're right. It's also called the initial value. So, remember, what is the coordinates of b? What is x always when it comes to b? What is... If I've got coordinates, I've got something b. In this case, b is 1.
1/2 b.
What is here always? 0. When you're looking at the y-intercept, the x-coordinate is always 0. Because it's right on the y-axis, which means x is 0. It's right there on the y-axis. So when you're writing these coordinates, it's always 0, comma, whatever b is. So I've got 0, and then I'll put a dot at b. So 0, comma, 1. There's my b, right there. Everyone good so far?
Yes, sir.
Now, let's use our slope, but we have to do something and pay attention. Is our slope positive or negative?
Positive.
What does that mean? It's going to go to which way? Is it going to go?
Right.
It's going to rise to the right. So, now this one's already a fraction. Rise over run, how far does it rise?
1.
How far does it run?
2.
So we rise 1, and we run 2. And there's our next point. Now, to make sure we know what we're doing, let's rise and run again. So if I'm at this point, how far do I rise?
1.
And run?
2.
Now, I'm going to go ahead and take my ruler or my straight edge, whatever happens to be your straight edge today, and I'm going to make a line. On my line, make sure that you've got arrows on both sides, because that line really does go on forever. As far as we're concerned, it does. There may be limits. That's something later on when we talk about domain and range, but that's for algebra, not for here.
Now, for emotional, stay emotionalized after bottom of the course.
Very good. Bryce is staying in motion until sleep hits her. Okay, so we just plotted a line, right?
Yes.
Let's do another. All right, so we've got a second equation here. Let me hit focus on this one. This one says y equals -3. There's way too much movement.
Sorry.
Y equals -3x plus 4. Right below it, we're going to write...
Y equals mx plus b.
Very good. We're going to write y equals mx plus b. That way, we can circle the parts. Now, m is not just 3. What is it?
3.
-3. And b is +4. So tell me, what's the coordinates of b? What's the x coordinate for b?
0.
0.
4.
Comma?
4.
4. Can we plot that one pretty easy?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to go up here to 4. 0, comma 4. We are going to run into a little problem here.
It's negative.
Okay, negative slope. We've got 3 as a slope. What would we prefer to have?
Positive.
Well, it's -3. We can't change the negative, but we'd rather have fraction. So what is the fraction?
1/3.
-3 over 1. So that means it's going to rise to this left side, right?
Yeah.
can I go rise 3 here?
No.
No.
Why not?
Because it's off the graph.
So rise and drop are really the same thing. I can drop 3 from 4. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to run 1. Which way does my line need to go?
Left.
So I'm going to have to go over here, right?
Yes.
And I'm going to do it a second time. How far am I going to drop?
3.
1, 2, 3, and run.
1.
Why did I do more than 1 point?
So it's a line.
So it's a line, and so that I know I'm not making a mess. If I accidentally count off, especially when you get these ones that are like 7 over 6. A rise of 7, a run of 6. That's a lot of counting, isn't it?
Did you go to the right?
I did. Why?
I don't know. You said go to the left.
Which way does it need to rise?
Oh.
Because it's a negative slope. And if it helps you, Bryce, if it helps you, right above it, put a little thing showing which way the line should go. It should go the negative direction, right?
Yeah.
That way, you can ignore everything else, and once you draw it, you can make sure your line goes the correct way. So I'm going to take my straight edge here. I'm going to draw my lines. What's going to be on each side of my line?
Arrows.
Arrows, that way I can sharpen pointy.
So we can stab someone with it.
That's right. If we need to defend ourselves, we can stab them with the graph.
Or you just stab for fun.
So, hey, how many of you like this thing, this calculator?
It's pretty awesome.
Good. Let's get to using our calculator. So, press the home button. On your calculator, press. By the way, those of you who make worm lines, worm lines are that where they just hand draw it and it looks like a worm went across the page. Huh?
You take points off of that.
I do. So, let's talk about how we can use our calculator to actually graph for us. So, what we're going to do is we're going to go to graph, which is B. If you're on the home screen, graph is B. Now, I want you guys to notice the control button over here. Well, you can't see my finger because it's hard to see. Control button, and you'll notice up on that big pad there, off to the right and left side, there's little orange things. They show paces. You see it?
No.
Look at the little pages, left and right. There's a page, left and right.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Where?
On the arrow.
Oh.
Next to the arrow.
Okay, so hit control and you'll see that you can move left and right among things from page to page. This button here that has a little calculator looking thing on the left will actually let you pause back and forth between your scratch paper and your graph.
Not working.
Araya, listen. No, listen. The little calculator button. Over here on this side, there's a little button, looks like a calculator on the left side, right above the tab. If you press that, it'll take you between your graph and between your scratch paper, so you never really have to get out. You just back and forth.
Oh my god, that's so cool.
So that makes life a little easier. So let's talk about one of those weird things. It's called a functional notation. A functional notation is used a lot sorry, in math. It's used in math because we can't always write y equals mx plus b. If I've got 12 equations and the same problem and everything says y equals mx plus b, it's a mess, isn't it? So we use something called f of x. F of x is written with an f and in parentheses an x. And it's usually a very fancy f when they like to do this. F of x equals is just a fancy way of saying y equals. So what I want you to do in your graph, I want you to hit the tab button. Hit the tab button. When you're on the graph, hit tab. What showed up on screen?
Nothing.
Right up here, it should say f of x equals.
Mine says F07.
Mine says F1X.
That's fine. It will say f1x. That's fine.
Mine says
Okay, take that out of your mouth. It's fine if it says f7. I'll show you how to clear that in a bit. So, shh. Keep your conversation here. Okay, so where it says f1 of x, or yours might have f7 or f2, if somebody's not cleared it out, that's fine. Put that away, Kirsten, and pay attention to this. Where it says that, that literally is y. It's just another way of writing y equals. So we're going to type our equation. Let's go to that first one where we had 1/2 x. So remember, 1/2, it's a fraction. Put it in parentheses. 1 divided by 2.
Wait, what? What are we putting?
1/2. We're putting the very first equation we had, which was graph the equation y equals 1/2 x plus 1. You see it? 1/2 x plus 1. The only thing you got to remember, if you've got fractions, put them in parentheses. If you don't, invariably the calculator will do its own thing. Everyone got it?
Yes.
Then hit enter,
It says syntax error.
because you didn't type it in that way.
Wait, what am I?
1/2 x plus 1.
Do I press enter?
Do you have
Yes.
to change the y equals? I'm passing.
I did it.
Okay, I didn't hear what you said.
You have to change the y equals?
It should already be there. F of x equals is the same as y. F of x equals is the same as y equals. If you typed y equals again, then you put too much into it.
I think I see it.
Does anybody not have that?
Whoa. Yeah.
Everyone should have a line on your screen. It should look pretty much like the line you drew on your graph. Everyone good so far?
Mine good. Mine good.
No, mine's like red and stuff.
I'm not worried about the color.
There's like 2 equations. It looks nothing like that.
I'm not worried about the color
Okay, mine looks different.
because you didn't type it in.
No, I did. Tristan did it for me. No way.
That was you last.
All right. So now let's talk about some ways that are important. Remember, when you're typing these in, you have to be exacting. F of x equals is the same as what?
Y.
Y equals. So now, sometimes this screen right here isn't really what you want to say. Look at our graph we have on the paper. It runs from 0 to 5, right? And 0 to 5. Everyone see that? Well, let's make our calculator look exactly the same as the paper. To do that, we're going to press Menu.
Graph entry.
Window Zoom, number 4. And then Window Setting, which is number 1. So everyone should be looking at this screen right now. Everyone there? So it's got X-Min, X-Max. You didn't know the X-Men were coming up, huh? X-Scale. What we're going to do is our X-Men, remember when we looked at it over here, the very smallest x-coordinate was -5. So up there we're going to replace -10 with -5. Our max is going to be 5, so you can just use your down arrows. Everyone's there so far?
Yeah.
X is -5, X-min is -5, X-max is 5.
Why is it 5?
Because it's on our scale here, on the paper. You look at the paper, it goes from 5 to -5, right?
Do you go to graph entry?
You're that far behind? Okay, you'll just have to wait.
You go to the one below that.
Okay, so for X scale, we're going to press 1 because in our graph, every X value is equal to 1, right, on the graph itself. So for our Y min, what's the minimum for the Y coordinates? What's the smallest on the Y coordinates?
5, -5.
-5 is the smallest. And then Y max is 5. And then Y scale, what kind of scale are we using?
1.
Ones. When you do that, press OK. And you'll see it converted that graph. Now there's one more thing I'd really like. What is it that's missing here?
The numbers.
The numbers are there. You just the dots or the grid, right?
Yeah, the actual.
It would be nice to have a grid. So let's go back to menu. We're going to go to view, number 2. And we're going to go to grid, number 2. Everyone see grid is 2? And then we're going to pick number 3, lined grid.
You have to do this every time?
No, once you're set, it's good.
Okay.
Chess.
So now it looks exactly like my paper, doesn't it? Which means I can verify what's on the paper by plotting in the calculator, or I can just type it on the calculator and stick it on the paper.
But how would you know which dots? Like,
Well, look at it. Where does it cross the y-axis?
oh.
Where does it cross the x-axis? Did I just get 2 points? Once I have 2 points, can I make a line?
Yes.
So the calculator can help you graph. Later on, so right now what I want you guys to do is I want you to graph, both of them say number 1, the second equation, even though they both say number 1. So how do I start with that?
You clear this?
No, just hit tab. Tab, it allows you to put in another line.
Oh.
You doing this?
I love cards.
So
Tab as well.
Do we have to put the negative
you do have to put negative 3x,
in parentheses?
nope,
Whoa.
plus 4. Negative 3x plus 4,
Enter.
and then you can hit enter. Towards the end of this unit, we're actually going to be solving for a system of equations, which means we're going to put in more than one equation, and we're going to find out the point where they cross. This makes it really easy, because it's right on the graph, right? Not a lot of work to that.
The point where they cross.
It's called the solution to a system of equations. All right. Anybody have questions about how to graph? How to use your calculator to help you do that? Okay.
Clear.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's a good question. Who just said that?
Like Isaiah.
Okay. How do you clear stuff?
Well, I know it's doc B, but it doesn't.
Doc B.
It doesn't work for everything.
Doc B.
Oh, well, it worked.
Now let's bring it back to. Oh.
No, all you gotta do is hit the little calculator button, and it cleared off that too.
Oh, that's cool.
Doc B will clear off both. Remember, you can use the calculator button to go back and forth. Pretty simple. All right, stop the recording.